the glass doors of the finance department burst open. 5 people in dark suits strode in, their faces set like stone. My coworkers froze mid-conversation, coffee cups suspended in the air. A tall woman with steel-rimmed glasses stepped forward, surveying our open-plan office with calculating eyes. "I'm Investigator Palmer with Grant Financial Forensics," she announced, her voice cutting through the morning chatter. "We're conducting an investigation into financial discrepancies within this department. Everyone is to remain at their workstations." 18 of us exchanged glances. Pens dropped. Someone gasped. Department Head Vaughn emerged from his office, his typical swagger replaced by stiff movements. "What's the meaning of this? We weren't notified of any." "This investigation is authorized by your board of directors," Palmer interrupted, handing him a document. "We have reason to believe there are significant irregularities in your financial reporting." My colleague Tina leaned over. "Ariel, what's happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. The moment I'd been anticipating for months had finally arrived. 2 investigators set up laptops in our conference room while others positioned themselves at strategic points around the floor. The air conditioner hummed loudly in the sudden silence. "We'll be interviewing each of you individually," Palmer continued. "Until then, continue your work as normal, but do not access any financial systems without our supervision." Panic erupted in whispers. Devin from Accounts Receivable looked like he might be sick. Lena started frantically closing windows on her computer. Vaughn's assistant Petra kept glancing at him, her fingers twisting her necklace. Vaughn cleared his throat. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. My team operates with complete transparency and—" Palmer cut him off again. "We'll start with you, Mr. Vaughn. Please bring your laptop." As Vaughn followed Palmer to the conference room, he shot me a look of pure venom. 6 weeks ago, I'd approached him about discrepancies I'd found, transfers that made no sense, missing funds disguised as operational costs. He'd dismissed me instantly. "You're overreaching, Ariel," he'd snapped. "Focus on your assigned tasks." The next morning, rumors circulated that I was making careless mistakes. Projects were taken from me. My quarterly performance review suddenly contained concerns that hadn't been mentioned before. One by one, my colleagues were called in. When they returned, they avoided looking at me. When Palmer approached my desk 3 hours later, the office had grown unnaturally quiet. "Miss Nash, you're next." The conference room felt smaller with 4 investigators inside. Palmer gestured to a chair across from her. "Miss Nash, several of your colleagues have mentioned you've been making calculation errors in recent months." I smiled slightly. "That's interesting. Have you checked the fiscal records from last quarter yet?" She frowned. "We're methodically working through." "I think you should look now," I said calmly. "Specifically transaction series WR1440 through WR1587. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Why those particular transactions?" "Because they tell a completely different story than what you're hearing." Palmer typed briefly, then frowned. Another investigator leaned over, studying her screen. "These transfers don't match the reported totals," she said slowly. "Now check who authorized them," I suggested. As she dug deeper, her expression transformed from skepticism to realization. If you're invested in finding out what happens next in this workplace betrayal, take a second to hit like and subscribe. Every subscription helps me bring more of these real-life dramas to light, stories where the underdog finally gets justice. Drop a comment with your predictions about who's behind the financial fraud and what evidence I might have gathered. Now, let's get back to the moment that changed everything. My name is Ariel Nash, 32, senior financial analyst with a perfect record until 3 months ago when everything started falling apart. I've always been the quiet one, the person who notices patterns others miss. My grandmother taught me bookkeeping in her small grocery store when I was just 10. "Numbers never lie," she'd say, "but people who use them sometimes do." I joined the company 4 years ago, climbing from junior analyst to senior in record time. My colleagues respected my abilities but kept their distance. I wasn't part of their happy hour crowd. I preferred spending evenings with my rescue greyhound, Ada, named after the first computer programmer. The first strange number appeared in March, a transfer of $24,750, labeled as equipment maintenance, for machines we had replaced last year. I flagged it as an error. 2 days later, the entry vanished from the system, replaced with a legitimate expense code. Strange, but systems glitch sometimes. Then I noticed more. Sums moving between accounts at odd hours, invoices with sequential numbers but non-sequential dates, expense reports with perfect, round figure totals. Anyone scanning quickly would miss these details, but I had developed a habit of cross-referencing everything. I built a private spreadsheet tracking discrepancies. By May, I had identified a pattern: approximately $42,000 disappeared monthly, siphoned through multiple transactions. The amounts were small enough to stay under approval thresholds but large enough to add up significantly. When I approached Vaughn with my findings, his reaction was immediate hostility. "You're seeing ghosts, Ariel," he said, barely glancing at my evidence. "These are authorized expenditures." "By whom?" I asked. "There's no proper documentation." He closed my laptop. "You've been working too hard. Maybe you need some time off." "I'm not mistaken," I insisted. "The money is being diverted through." "Enough." He stood abruptly. "This isn't your concern. Return to your assigned projects." The next morning, I discovered I'd been removed from 3 accounts and reassigned to basic data entry. Colleagues who'd previously sought my help now avoided me. Whispers followed me to the break room. "Apparently, she's been making massive errors. Vaughn had to stay late fixing her mistakes. Probably won't make it past the next review." I maintained my composure but felt the ground shifting beneath me. 12 years of building a spotless professional reputation, vanishing because I'd asked the wrong questions. That evening, I considered my options. Approaching upper management seemed risky. Vaughn golfed weekly with the CFO. Human Resources reported directly to them both. I could quit, but that meant abandoning any chance of clearing my name. Plus, someone was stealing from the company, and they were setting me up to take the blame. I made my decision at 2 a.m., sitting on my apartment balcony with Ada curled at my feet. I would become invisible, the person nobody watches, because they've already decided she doesn't matter. For the next 10 weeks, I arrived early and stayed late. During work hours, I made a show of struggling with basic tasks, feeding the narrative that I was incompetent. But after everyone left, I meticulously traced every suspicious transaction, documenting connections that grew increasingly clear. I discovered Vaughn wasn't working alone. 3 other colleagues, Preston from tax compliance, Zoe from accounts payable, and Grant, Vaughn's right-hand man, were involved. They'd created a sophisticated system of fake vendor accounts and manipulated internal transfers. More disturbing, I found evidence suggesting this had been happening for almost 2 years, with the missing funds now totaling over $1 million. The week before the investigation, I'd noticed increased activity. Larger transfers, hasty cover-ups. They were accelerating their timeline, perhaps planning to frame me completely before moving on. I knew I had to act before they did. I anonymously sent key evidence to the board of directors, just enough to trigger an investigation but not enough to show my hand. Then I waited. Now, sitting across from Palmer, I pulled a memory stick from my pocket. This contains my analysis. 18 months of patterns showing how they diverted company funds to private investments. The transactions were timed to coincide with my audit days, making it appear I was responsible. Palmer's eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you report this through proper channels?" "Because the proper channels were compromised," I replied. "Vaughn and the CFO are close friends. HR reports to them both." "So you conducted your own investigation," she said, not as a question. "I protected myself," I corrected. "When someone starts building a case against you, sometimes collecting evidence is your only defense." "These are serious allegations against senior personnel," she said carefully, "which is why the proof had to be irrefutable." Palmer inserted my memory stick into her computer. As she scrolled through my files, her colleague's phone buzzed. He stepped outside, then returned moments later. "Palmer, we need to talk," he said urgently. "Now." They excused themselves, leaving me alone in the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Vaughn watching me, his expression calculating. He believed he still had the upper hand. He had no idea what was coming. When Palmer returned, something had shifted. "Miss Nash, we'd like you to remain after hours today. We have more questions about these transactions." "Of course," I replied. As I left the conference room, Vaughn intercepted me in the hallway, his voice low. "Whatever you think you've done, it won't work. Nobody beats me at my own game." I looked him directly in the eyes. "I'm not playing your game. I created a new one." He laughed, but uncertainty flickered across his face. You should have taken the hint and resigned when you had the chance. Now you'll leave in disgrace. I simply smiled and returned to my desk, feeling his eyes burning into my back. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had uncovered something far worse than simple embezzlement. The rabbit hole went deeper than anyone suspected, and I had followed it all the way down. The rest of that day moved like a carefully orchestrated dance. Investigators converted our break room into a command center, filling it with monitors displaying financial records. Every so often, one would emerge to collect another colleague for questioning. By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere had grown thick with tension. Zoe approached my desk, voice artificially bright. Weird day, right? What did they ask you about? I noticed Preston and Grant watching from across the room. I kept my expression neutral. Just routine questions. My responsibilities, reporting structure, nothing major. Oh, she seemed disappointed. They grilled me about access permissions, as if I'd have any reason to mess with the books. I shrugged. I'm sure they're just being thorough. Her smile tightened. Well, we're all in this together, right? I'm sure everything will be cleared up soon. As she walked away, I caught her exchanging glances with Preston. They were fishing for information, trying to gauge what I might have said. At 5:30, most staff were dismissed for the day. Palmer asked Vaughn, Preston, Zoe, Grant, and me to remain. The 5 investigators split us up, placing us in separate conference rooms. I was left alone for nearly an hour, a classic pressure tactic. When Palmer finally returned, she wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit introduced himself as Gregory Winters, the company's external legal counsel. Miss Nash, he began, the allegations you've brought forward are extraordinary. Financial fraud of this magnitude could severely impact the company's reputation. I noticed his careful wording. Not the fraud itself, but the allegations of fraud. I understand your concern, I replied. That's why I documented everything so thoroughly. Palmer placed a folder on the table. We've reviewed your evidence. Some of it is compelling, but there are gaps. Such as? You've identified unusual transactions, but haven't definitively connected them to the individuals you've named. I felt a chill. They were giving me an exit ramp, a way to back down. The connections are in the metadata, I explained. Each transaction has a digital fingerprint. Check the authorization codes, then cross-reference with login records. Palmer exchanged glances with Winters. We did. The login credentials used were yours. I'd expected this, because they were using my account. Notice the timestamps. Many of these transactions occurred while I was in documented meetings. Check the security camera footage from the executive conference room on April 12th. I was presenting quarterly projections from 2:15 to 4:30 p.m. During that same time frame, my credentials were used to process 6 transfers. Winters leaned forward. Miss Nash, do you realize the gravity of accusing your department head and senior colleagues of criminal activity? If you're mistaken, I'm not, I interrupted. And there's more. I reached for my bag, but Palmer stopped me. We've already examined the contents of your memory stick. Not everything is on the stick, I said. Some things I kept separate. I pulled out my phone and opened a locked folder. 2 weeks ago, I received this email from an anonymous account. I handed Palmer my phone. She read silently, then passed it to Winters. His expression darkened. This appears to be communication about offshore accounts, he said carefully. It is. Sent accidentally to a general department address rather than a private one. I was monitoring all unusual communications as part of my investigation. This alone doesn't prove who sent it, Palmer noted. True, but when I traced the IP address, it came from a device registered to Grant's wife's art gallery. The account mentioned Meridia Holdings, is registered in the Cayman Islands with Preston's brother-in-law listed as a director. Their stunned silence confirmed I'd caught them off guard. There's a difference between suspicion and evidence, I continued. I made sure to collect the latter. Palmer recovered first. If what you're saying is true, why would they risk sending this from a traceable location? Because they got sloppy. Success bred overconfidence. They've been doing this for almost 2 years without anyone noticing. Except you, Winters said. I notice patterns. It's what I do. Palmer closed her folder. We need to verify this new information. Please wait here. Left alone again, I watched the office through glass walls. In separate conference rooms, I could see my 4 colleagues. Vaughn appeared collected, occasionally checking his watch. Preston kept rubbing his temples. Grant stared at a fixed point on the table. Zoe was visibly agitated, gesturing as she spoke to her interrogator. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off now. Last warning. I took a screenshot and set the phone on the table. More evidence. As darkness fell outside, the investigation intensified. 2 more people arrived. A woman who headed straight for the server room with an IT security badge, and a man carrying forensic equipment. Around 8 p.m., Palmer returned with a tray of sandwiches and coffee. This is taking longer than anticipated, she said. We've contacted the board. They're convening an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Have you found what you're looking for? I asked. She remained professional. We're still investigating, but I should inform you that Mr. Vaughn has made counter-allegations. He claims you've been manipulating data to frame him because he gave you a poor performance review. I'd anticipated this. That review only appeared in my file after I questioned the discrepancies. He says you've been resentful since being passed over for promotion last year. I wasn't eligible for promotion last year. I'd only been in my position for 10 months. The minimum requirement is 12. Palmer made a note. He also suggests you may have personal motives. Something about a relationship that ended badly? I nearly laughed. I've never had a personal relationship with Vaughn or any colleague that's easily verified. One more thing, Palmer said, her tone shifting slightly. We found something interesting when we examined the server logs. Someone accessed the financial systems every night between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. for the past 3 months, using your credentials. That was me, I confirmed. I stayed late to document the fraud without being observed. So, you admit to unauthorized system access after hours? I felt the trap closing. There's nothing in company policy prohibiting working late. I used my own legitimate credentials to investigate suspicious activity that threatened the company. Palmer studied me. You understand this could be interpreted as stalking or harassment. By whom? The people I caught stealing? That remains to be determined. She stood. Get some rest, Miss Nash. We'll continue tomorrow. When I finally left at 10 p.m., the building was eerily silent. In the parking garage, I found my car blocked by a black SUV with tinted windows. As I approached, the driver's window lowered. Grant leaned out, his face hard in the shadows. You have no idea what you've started, he said quietly. Vaughn has friends in places you can't imagine. Is that supposed to frighten me? I asked. It should. This goes beyond a few questionable transactions, Ariel. Walk away now. Say you made a mistake. Overworked, stressed, jumping at shadows. Why would I do that? Because otherwise your future disappears. No one hires a whistleblower. Even if you're right, especially if you're right, your career is over. I stepped closer. Is that what happened to Constance? His face went slack. What? Constance Myers. The analyst who left suddenly last year. She found something too, didn't she? Grant recovered quickly. She relocated for personal reasons. Did she? Because I can't find any trace of her. No social media, no new employment records. It's like she vanished. You're paranoid, he snapped, but his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Tell Vaughn his intimidation tactics won't work. I've already secured my evidence in multiple locations. Anything happens to me, it all goes public. He revved the engine. You've made a terrible mistake. As he drove away, I took several deep breaths to steady myself. The confrontation confirmed what I'd suspected. There was something bigger at stake than embezzlement. Something worth threatening me over. I spent that night in a hotel, not taking chances with my apartment's security. Sleep came in broken fragments between bouts of anxiety. By 6 a.m., I gave up trying and prepared for what might be the most consequential day of my career. When I arrived at the office at 7:30, the investigation team had already returned. New faces had joined them, 2 people with FBI credentials. Palmer intercepted me at the elevator. The board meeting has been moved up. They're waiting for us now. The executive floor was a world apart from our department, polished wood and hushed conversations. The boardroom door opened to reveal 12 people seated around a massive table. At the head sat CEO Jonathan Phillips, a man I'd only seen in company-wide presentations. Vaughn and his 3 accomplices were already seated on one side, looking professionally composed but with tension evident in their postures. I was directed to sit opposite them. Phillips opened the meeting. As you're all aware, serious allegations have emerged regarding financial improprieties in our accounting department. Both sides will present their evidence, after which the board will determine next steps. Vaughn spoke first, his voice steady and reasonable. I appreciate the board's attention to this matter, which I believe stems from a misunderstanding. Miss Nash is a talented analyst whose performance has unfortunately declined in recent months. When I addressed these issues in her review, she became defensive and began constructing this elaborate accusation. He presented a timeline portraying me as an employee with deteriorating performance who had launched a vendetta after legitimate criticism. He explained away the suspicious transactions as routine operations that would be clear to anyone with proper training. Furthermore, he continued, our IT department confirms Miss Nash accessed systems after hours without authorization, potentially altering records herself. It was a masterful performance, measured, logical, and utterly false. When my turn came, I felt 17 pairs of eyes scrutinizing me. The pressure was immense, but I'd prepared for this moment for months. Thank you for hearing me today, I began. What Mr. Vaughn presented sounds reasonable, but it's a carefully constructed fiction. The timeline is crucial here, but not the one he presented. I distributed a document to everyone present. This is the actual sequence of events, with supporting evidence noted for each entry. You'll see the financial discrepancies began 18 months ago, accelerated 6 months ago, and my performance review was only modified after I raised concerns. I walked them through the evidence methodically, using the projector to display key documents. As I spoke, I noticed something unexpected. One board member, a woman named Teresa, was taking notably detailed notes and occasionally exchanging glances with Palmer. The most compelling evidence, I continued, came to light only yesterday, when your forensic team examined the backup servers. The primary records were altered, but the automatic backups preserved the original entries. I nodded to Palmer, who projected a new document. This comparison shows the original transactions beside the modified versions. The alterations consistently redirect funds through shell companies that, when traced, connect to personal accounts held by the 4 individuals involved. Vaughn's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. She's manipulating data to frame us. The backup server timestamps can't be altered, I replied calmly. They show when each change was made and by whom. The CEO studied the documents. These discrepancies are significant. Mr. Vaughn, how do you explain them? Vaughn leaned forward. There's a simple explanation. Nash has been planning this for months. She could have easily... A sharp knock interrupted him. The boardroom door opened, and a woman entered, handing a folder to Palmer, who reviewed it quickly before passing it to Phillips. His face darkened as he read. Mr. Vaughn, were you aware of Meridia Holdings in the Cayman Islands? Vaughn went perfectly still. I'm not familiar with that entity. That's interesting, Phillips said, because we have documentation of transfers totaling over $2 million from our operating accounts to Meridia, subsequently distributed to private accounts held by you and your associates. The room erupted in chaos. Grant started shouting accusations. Preston turned ghostly pale. Zoe burst into tears. And in that moment of confusion, Teresa slid a small note across the table to me. It read, "We need to talk privately, not just about this." I glanced up in confusion, but her expression revealed nothing. As security personnel entered the boardroom, I realized this was far from over. The truth I'd uncovered was just the beginning. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of statements, affidavits, and meetings with corporate lawyers. The scandal erupted like wildfire throughout the company. Security escorted Vaughn and his accomplices from the building that same day, their personal items shipped to them later after being thoroughly examined for additional evidence. I remained isolated, shuttled between conference rooms for various interviews. During brief breaks, I caught glimpses of shocked colleagues huddled in small groups, their whispered conversations halting whenever I approached. Late Wednesday afternoon, Palmer found me in the small meditation room where I'd retreated for a moment of quiet. "The district attorney's office is moving quickly," she said, closing the door behind her. "The evidence is overwhelming. All 4 are facing multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, and potentially money laundering." I nodded, feeling hollow despite the vindication. The adrenaline that had sustained me for months was crashing, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Teresa asked to meet with you," Palmer continued, watching me carefully. "Do you know why?" "No, she passed me a note during the board meeting, but we've never spoken before." Palmer hesitated. "Teresa isn't just a board member. She chairs the audit committee and has a background in federal financial crimes investigation. Her presence at that meeting wasn't coincidental." What does that mean? It means your discovery may have uncovered something bigger than corporate theft. She glanced at her watch. She's waiting in the executive lounge. I'll take you there. The executive lounge occupied the building's top floor with panoramic views of the city. Teresa sat alone by the window, a slim leather portfolio on the table before her. In her early 50s, she carried herself with the assured confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "Miss Nash," she greeted me, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Thank you for making time." Palmer excused herself, leaving us alone. "I've been following your work these past 2 days," Teresa began. "Your attention to detail is exceptional." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "What made you dig deeper after Vaughn dismissed your concerns? Most people would have backed down." I considered my answer. Numbers don't lie. When someone works too hard to hide them, I get curious. She smiled slightly. "A quality we share." She opened her portfolio. "Are you familiar with financial consulting firm Abbott Partners?" "Vaguely. They're based in Chicago, I believe. They're also our company's external auditors. Have been for 7 years." She slid a document across the table. "This is their most recent audit report from 4 months ago. Perfect scores across all departments, including finance." I scanned the report. Given what we've uncovered, this audit should have flagged numerous inconsistencies. "Exactly. Either they're incompetent or they're complicit," I finished. Teresa nodded. "For the past 18 months, I've been working with a federal task force investigating a pattern of corporate fraud across multiple industries. Abbott Partners is the common denominator. They certify clean audits for companies where executives are siphoning funds." My mind raced. So Vaughn and his team weren't acting alone. They had outside help concealing their activities. "We believe Abbott Partners is running a sophisticated operation. They place people inside client companies, establish embezzlement schemes, then use their position as auditors to hide the evidence." "And you think someone at our company was planted by Abbott?" Teresa leaned forward. "We know it. Grant worked for Abbott's Chicago office before joining us 3 years ago. His hiring coincided with our company switching to Abbott as our auditor." The pieces clicked together. "That explains why Grant tried to intimidate me in the parking garage. He's protecting something bigger than himself." "Precisely. We've been building a case against Abbott for years, but couldn't identify their inside operators at various companies. You've just handed us one network. Is that why you were at the board meeting? You were hoping the investigation would expose this connection?" Teresa nodded. "The FBI has been monitoring suspicious activities here for months, but needed concrete evidence tying individuals to Abbott. Your discovery accelerated everything. I absorbed this information, feeling both validated and uneasy." "What happens now?" "The 4 individuals from your department will face charges, but our primary target is Abbott's leadership. We need your help." "What kind of help?" "Testimony primarily. But first," she slid another document across the table, "we need to ensure your safety." I glanced at the paper. "Witness protection?" "A modified version. Abbott has resources and isn't above using them against whistleblowers. We've seen it before." Grant's parking garage threat suddenly felt more ominous. "You mentioned Constance Myers, didn't you?" Teresa's expression tightened. "You know about Myers?" "I found personnel records showing she left suddenly last year. When I mentioned her to Grant, his reaction was telling. Constance Myers discovered similar discrepancies. She approached Vaughn, then disappeared the next day. Her resignation letter cited family issues. We've been trying to locate her." A chill ran through me. "What do you think happened to her?" "Nothing good." Teresa's voice hardened. "Which is why we're taking your protection seriously." The next morning, a new crisis erupted. I arrived to find the executive floor in chaos. Phillips was shouting into his phone while board members clustered in agitated groups. Teresa pulled me aside. "The 4 suspects were released on bail last night. This morning, we discovered the primary evidence servers were physically damaged. Someone accessed the secure server room overnight." "That's impossible," I said. "Those servers are protected by biometric security." "Which means someone with high-level access is involved. Someone still inside the company." I felt the floor drop beneath me. "The evidence? Much of it is compromised. The backups were targeted specifically." "But I kept separate copies," I said. "The memory stick. My private records. Also gone. Your desk was broken into last night." My hands began to shake. Months of painstaking work, destroyed in hours. "They're going to get away with it." Teresa's expression remained calm. "Not necessarily. The company's legal counsel is trying to delay proceedings until we can reconstruct the evidence, but without your documentation. I leaned against the wall, mind racing. They knew exactly what to target. This wasn't panic destruction. It was strategic, which confirms our suspicion that someone senior is involved, someone who knew precisely where the evidence was stored. A terrible thought occurred to me. What about the copies I gave to Palmer's team? Teresa's silence answered my question. We need to leave, she said quietly. Now. She led me through a service corridor to an elevator I didn't know existed. As we descended to the parking garage, she outlined the situation in clipped sentences. We believe Abbott has a senior contact inside the company, possibly an executive. The operation is more extensive than we realized. With the evidence compromised, the case is unraveling. The DA is being pressured to drop charges. So they win, I said numbly. Not yet, Teresa's voice hardened. But we need to move you to safety while we regroup. A black sedan waited in a reserved space. As we approached, a man stepped out of the shadows. Grant. My heart lurched. Going somewhere? He asked, his voice eerily pleasant. Teresa positioned herself between us. This is a federal matter now, Mr. Grant. Interfering would be unwise. He smiled. No interference, just delivering a message. He looked directly at me. Vaughn appreciates your creativity, Ariel. A shame your evidence couldn't withstand scrutiny. The evidence was destroyed, I countered, not discredited. A distinction without difference in court. His confidence was chilling. The board is reconsidering its position. By this afternoon, this unfortunate misunderstanding will be resolved. Vaughn has graciously offered to not pursue defamation charges if you tender your resignation immediately. The casual arrogance infuriated me. After everything they'd done, the theft, the manipulation, potentially harming Constance, they expected to simply walk away. Something shifted inside me. A calm clarity replaced my anxiety. Tell Vaughn I'm looking forward to seeing him this afternoon, I replied. At the board meeting. Grant's smile faltered slightly. There's no board meeting scheduled. There will be, I said with newfound confidence. Emergency session at 2 p.m. Teresa gave me a questioning look but remained silent. Grant studied my face, searching for deception. Finding none, uncertainty crept into his expression. What are you planning? Just delivering a message of my own. See you at 2. As he retreated, Teresa guided me quickly to the car. What board meeting are you talking about? I smiled. The one you're going to call right now. At precisely 2 p.m., the boardroom filled once again. Vaughn, Preston, Zoe, and Grant entered as a unified front, their confidence restored by the morning's developments. They took their seats with the air of people who had weathered a minor inconvenience rather than criminal charges. Phillips opened the session. We've called this meeting to address recent developments regarding the financial investigation. In light of new information, we need to reassess yesterday's conclusions. Vaughn smiled thinly. I appreciate the board's willingness to correct a misunderstanding. As I maintained from the beginning, these allegations were baseless. I sat silently, watching. Teresa beside me, equally composed. The company's legal counsel spoke next. Given the compromise of key evidence, the district attorney is re-evaluating the case. We have been advised that charges may be withdrawn pending further investigation. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several board members appeared troubled but resigned. Additionally, the counsel continued, Mr. Vaughn has raised concerns about the investigation's procedural integrity. He alleges evidence may have been manipulated. Vaughn leaned forward. I take no pleasure in this situation. Mistakes happen, even with dedicated employees like Miss Nash. I'm prepared to put this unfortunate episode behind us. His magnanimity made my skin crawl, but I maintained my composure. Phillips turned to me. Miss Nash, do you have anything to add before we proceed? I stood slowly, feeling all eyes upon me. Yes, I'd like to address the compromised evidence. There's little to address, Vaughn interjected. The alleged evidence no longer exists. That's not entirely accurate, I replied. While the local copies were destroyed, I never kept all my evidence in one place. The room went silent. 3 months ago, I recognized the pattern of harassment following my initial report. I anticipated potential retaliation, including destruction of evidence, so I took precautions. I removed a small device from my pocket. This is an encryption key containing complete duplicates of everything. Original transactions, modified entries, transfer records, offshore account details. The entire trail. Vaughn's smile froze. But that's just documentation. The truly compelling evidence is something else entirely. I pressed a button on my phone. I'd like to play a recording for the board. Grant's voice filled the room. This goes beyond a few questionable transactions, Ariel. Walk away now. Say you made a mistake. My response followed. Why would I do that? Then Grant again. Because otherwise, your future disappears. No one hires a whistleblower. And finally, the critical exchange about Constance Myers. As the recording ended, Vaughn's face contorted with fury. You recorded that conversation illegally. Actually, Teresa interjected, Miss Nash was wearing a federal wire during that encounter. We have proper authorization. I continued calmly. But the parking garage conversation is just the beginning. For the past month, I've been working directly with Miss Teresa's federal task force, wearing recording devices during multiple interactions with all 4 conspirators. I placed my encryption key on the table. Every threat, every attempt at intimidation, every discussion of the scheme, all preserved and duplicated across secure federal servers. Servers you can't access or destroy. The blood drained from Vaughn's face as understanding dawned. You set us up. No, I gave you enough rope to hang yourselves. And you did, repeatedly. Grant lunged across the table for the encryption key, but federal agents who had been positioned discreetly around the room moved in swiftly. Oliver Grant, announced one agent. You're under arrest for conspiracy, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. As the agents detained all 4, Teresa addressed the board. This company has been infiltrated by a criminal organization operating through Abbott Partners. We have reason to believe at least one executive-level employee is also involved. The CEO went pale. Who? Teresa smiled slightly. That will become clear very soon. Meanwhile, these 4 individuals are facing significant federal charges. Charges supported by evidence they cannot access or destroy. As Vaughn was led away, he locked eyes with me one final time. This isn't over, he hissed. Actually it is, I replied, and Constance Myers sends her regards. His shock was palpable. The investigation had uncovered Constance living under an assumed name in Arizona, frightened but alive, ready to testify. In the aftermath, the company underwent a complete restructuring. 3 executives with ties to Abbott Partners resigned. The board appointed Teresa as interim CFO to rehabilitate the finance department. And me? I was offered a new position, Director of Financial Integrity, reporting directly to the board. My first assignment, designing new systems to prevent similar schemes across all company divisions. Sometimes justice isn't about dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's about patience, meticulous documentation, and understanding that the most effective revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but using their own actions to bring them down. If you found this story of corporate justice satisfying, make sure to like and subscribe for more true accounts of underdogs who refuse to be silenced. Have you ever encountered workplace corruption? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story taught you anything about standing up for what's right, pass it along to someone who might need the inspiration. Until next time, remember, the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep people try to bury it.